Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Miley Adler. I work for the Bureau of Land Management out of the Arizona State Office, and I serve as the Arizona Recreation Program Lead. I'm thrilled you're joining us today, and I'll be facilitating this webinar. For your awareness, this webinar will be recorded. So first, I'd like to introduce the rest of our panel members. So if you'd please turn your cameras on. We have Nancy Favor, Planning and Environmental Specialist at the Arizona State Office with the Bureau of Land Management. We've got Cam Gale, contractor with Advanced Resource Solutions. And lastly, we have Ray Castro, the field manager for Yuma Field Office. And Ray, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this route evaluation presentation for the Yuma East Gila River Travel Management Plan. I'm Ray Castro, the field manager for the Yuma Field Office, and Cam will guide us through this presentation, so thank you for joining.
Thanks, Ray. So during the entire webinar tonight, if you would like to post any questions, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panel. So we'll address those questions after the main presentation, and then we'll be opening it up for a Q&A session. And we'll be providing more information, more detailed instructions on how to raise your hand after the main presentation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Cam for the presentation.
All right, thanks, Smiley. All right, so as Miley said, you're stuck with me for about 15 minutes here to kind of cover the basics of this planning process and where we are right now. I'll try to orient you to the area, what we're up to and what we're looking for in terms of feedback from the public at this point. So as Ray said, this plan will be known as the Yuma East Gila River Travel Management Plan. And so that's also the name of what we call the travel management area. As Miley indicated, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, so you'll have a chance to pester us with some questions about what we're up to and anything else that you're interested in regarding this travel plan. Please note that any questions that come up, any comments that you might have this evening, if you put them in the chat or whether you speak those to us later on, they are not considered official comments during this period. If you do want to submit official comments for the record, those need to be submitted via e-planning. We'll explain more about that process in just a few minutes, or via email, and we'll give you that email address here shortly as well. Or you can stop by the field office, the Yuma Field Office, or mail your comments into the Yuma Field Office during this public comment period. It's running well from Monday earlier this week until February 21st. Later on in the process, there'll be another chance to comment when we get more into the environmental planning stage. So the agenda for this presentation, we'll give you some background on the project. We'll then talk about maps and the options you have available to see the maps of the routes and the area. We'll tell you where we are in the process and what the timeline kind of looks like. And then we'll explain in more detail how you can comment to help out the Bureau of Land Management in this effort. And then we'll end this webinar with a chance for you to ask questions. You can see the basic travel management area on this map. This is available also on that e-planning site as a static PDF map. Basically running from Yuma and areas south of there along the Gila River corridor and I-8, and then on up to about I-10. So it's a fairly large area, and within this area, on BLM managed lands alone, there are approximately 1,250 miles of routes. So we're talking about a fairly large area and a fairly substantial amount of mileage that's in the inventory. So the purpose for this plan that the BLM is in the process of is to develop a travel management plan of designated travel routes. Previous to this plan and up to this point, this area has been managed as was limited to existing routes, but the BLM has not subjected every individual route that exists out there on BLM lands to an evaluation process to determine their long-term purpose and need for the public and for authorized and administrative use. During the resource management plan, or RMP planning, that happened prior to signing that plan in 2010, the BLM did have an inventory of routes and established a preliminary transportation system that limited motorized use to existing routes. But once this plan that we're working on now goes into place, then it will be limited to designated routes. So a little bit more pointed. And it's worth also noting that there are some areas within this travel management area that are closed to OHV use or public motorized use. There's wilderness areas, and there are a couple other areas for other resources that are closed to OHV use as well. You can see some other guidance and conformance listed at the bottom of this slide. And if you're interested in some of that, we're happy to talk in more detail, but the guidance and conformance that are going to kind of lead the way are the BLM's own manuals and handbooks related to travel and transportation, federal regulations, executive orders, as well as other processes like the Endangered Species Act and the National Historic Preservation Act. The meeting tonight is focused on the route inventory, and this public comment period in general is focused on the route inventory. So what we're really hoping to solicit is information about the routes that are included in the inventory or that have possibly been missed by the crews that have tried to drive the routes on the ground to the extent that they're able. Like I mentioned, there's approximately 1,250 miles of routes included in this inventory. As the BLM goes through the evaluation process, they'll formulate some alternatives and eventually hope to propose or to designate each route as either open to public motorized use, limited in some way, limit could be seasonally or otherwise, or to propose them as closed to the public. There will be multiple alternatives that the BLM will consider on a system-wide basis. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And the BLM will soon, within the next couple of months, start in on an environmental planning process that involves an environmental assessment to disclose the potential impacts from this plan as well. There are a few definitions that we want you to be aware of, just to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. An OHV, an off-highway vehicle, is defined in the federal regulations as any motorized vehicle that's in use by the public. So while sometimes we might think of OHVs as four-wheel drive vehicles, it actually means any motorized vehicle that the public is operating. If a route is designated as OHV open, it would mean that the route is open year-round to all modes of travel and uses, so motorized, non-motorized, etc. If a route eventually gets designated as OHV limited, that limit could be to a particular season. So it might be open during some seasons of the year, closed during others to protect, say, wildlife. Might be limited by the vehicle width or type, depending on safety issues and so on. And then a route might also be proposed as OHV closed, which would mean that to the public, the route would not be available, but authorized or administrative use could continue. So if there are permittees or Arizona Game and Fish that need access on a route, but the public does not have a purpose and need for the route, that would fall under the general category of OHV closed. The alternatives that I mentioned earlier that the Bureau of Land Management is in the process of formulating. Again, these are not established yet, but this is part of the process that the BLM is in right now will consist of 4 different alternatives, and they're themed differently in order to provide a reasonable range of alternatives to consider. Alternative A is what is currently on the ground and what's currently being managed for. That'll be the baseline by which the other alternatives are compared. Alternative B, or beta, will have a natural resource emphasis, so kind of a protection emphasis. And once these alternatives are formulated with the different proposed designations, alternative B will likely have more routes that will be closed to the public. In other words, fewer routes would be open to the public, and that's to protect natural resources or cultural resources. Alternative C will be kind of the middle alternative, or multiple use emphasis, so a blend of resource protection and access. And alternative D, or delta, will have a theme of an access oriented emphasis. So in the end, once the alternatives kind of get refined and dialed in, alternative D would have the most routes open to the public and the fewest routes closed of those what we call action alternatives. So again, alternative A is what's currently being managed for on the ground, and then the other alternatives would be changes from that. In terms of the whole process, right now we're gathering information about the route inventory. And so that's what we're going to be looking for feedback from you on as a public. We're evaluating the routes on a route by route basis, which is something that the federal regulations require, that we consider every route on an individual basis as well as part of a system. And we're in the process of formulating those alternatives. So determining under alternative B, if a route should be open, limited, or closed, under C, under D, and eventually all those routes will be evaluated, and we'll address the federal regulations with each one of those. So that's where we are currently. In the future, once this public comment period is wrapped up and we get the information on the inventory, we will start work on an environmental assessment to both analyze and disclose the potential impacts from this travel plan on various resources and resource uses. There'll be another public comment period. And in fact, that's during that public comment period, Ray has already talked about wanting to have an in-person meeting to make sure that you have a chance to talk face-to-face about that. We'll use the feedback from that public comment period to develop then a final environmental assessment that will then be used to make an eventual decision on whether routes will be open, limited, or closed. Once that decision is issued, then the BLM will prepare a sign plan. They'll produce new maps and update the maps that are out there, and work on rehabilitating any routes that need to be closed if necessary. So that's the whole process. More specifically tonight, and during this public comment period we're in right now, we're looking for comments that can really help the BLM with this project. And the more specific your comments, the better off and the more helpful they'll be. So we're looking for any information on whether there are resources of a particular concern that you know about within this travel management area that a route might affect. We're looking for if you know about specific routes that are missing, or specific routes that are included but really should be closed for some reason, or if you think the particular designation would be helpful and why. Your rationale for your thinking would be really important and informative. And also the rationale that you can give, if it's specific, then it helps to produce what we call a substantive comment that is helpful in the planning process. The comments that you do have related to the route inventory can be submitted via e-planning, and we'll show you that site here in just a couple minutes. E-planning is a really useful tool for the BLM to catalog the comments in one place, but the BLM does provide other options for submitting your comments. So you can submit them via email. You can see that down toward the bottom of this slide. It's az_ym_trails@blm.gov. So you can email comments directly to that email address. And you can also either send via mail or drop by in person to the Yuma Field Office to talk with staff, and they are able to record comments in person that way too. This would also be a good opportunity for me to mention this. Ray will probably reiterate this at some point, but there will be hard copy maps of the travel management area and the inventory available starting tomorrow at the Yuma Field Office. So if you're not wanting to use the computer and the interactive map tool, then that is an option for you as well. We'll open up the e-planning site here in just a moment, but I'll show you kind of a stepped process that you'll want to follow in order to submit comments. And again, this e-planning tool will have a number of things that are going to be, we think, helpful to you and then helpful to the BLM in collecting the comments as well. So there's a URL there at the bottom of the slide that will, and as well as the QR code that you can see on the screen there, that will take you to the e-planning site for this project. Once you're there, you'll be able to click on the Maps tab. It's probably going to be your most interesting tab of the options here, and that'll open up a screen like you see on the slide there with a link to the story map. And that story map is going to be a really useful option for you, because once you click on that link to open the story map, it'll actually walk you through the project and some options you have. It'll explain some of the tools available to you within the map. We'll talk about those again here in a minute to show you how to navigate that. But we do want to encourage you to check that out. It's a really nice feature, and we think particularly useful for zooming in and out and finding specific routes and finding where maybe routes need to be in this inventory. I will point out also when we get there that within the story map, where the arrow is pointing to there on the slide, if you click on that little button, it will actually pop the map out into its own screen in a new tab, so that you can go full screen, and that'll even probably be a better option for you. When you do get ready to submit your comments, after you've looked at the map and used those tools, there's a Participate Now tab on the menu on the left-hand side of the e-planning site. If you click on that Participate Now tab, you'll then want to click on the Participate Now button, which you can see kind of toward the center of the screen. And once you click on that Participate Now button, it will open up a comment screen, so you can actually type your comment in and contact information and so on. And again, we're looking for substantive comments. Those would be ones that provide specific information related to resources or to specific routes. We'd like to know what you know about the routes in terms of their purpose and their need. What kind of use are they getting? How much use are they getting? Personal preferences, we understand the desire to voice those, but substantive comments are often not personal preferences. They're more informational in nature. We'll get to questions here in a minute, but before we do that, I'd like to share another option here. Okay, so you should be seeing now the e-planning site for the Bureau of Land Management. I wanted to start from there just to show you that if you type in Yuma East on the BLM's e-planning site, then it should take you to this project. We'll click on that to open up the project. And this page should look a lot like those screenshots I just showed you. We have options on the left-hand side. If you click on Maps, then you'll see a link to the story map. So I'm going to open that up first. And as I said, once you open that up, it's really kind of a nice visual tool. You can scroll, and as you do, it'll walk you through the project. It'll talk about the inventory map. And you can interact with that map right here. You can zoom in and out. So I can click on it and zoom in, zoom out. And I can also keep scrolling where there's some instructions on how to comment. But I wanted to show you that this map will be even more user-friendly, I think, if you click on this little pop-out tab. And then it'll make it full screen for you. Give it just a second to load here. And now I can scroll around, I can zoom in and zoom out. And there are some pretty useful, maybe powerful tools for you here. One of the basic things you can do is to zoom in. And so if I get a little closer here, I can actually click on a route and it'll give me the route ID number. And so if you're submitting a comment about this particular route, you'll be able to identify it by that route ID number, and that would be really useful for the BLM to know which route you're talking about. If you're not sure where you are and you like to locate things by township and range, then we do have those options built into the map as well. So you'll see that right now you can kind of see the surface management of the BLM lands. I'll zoom out a little bit. So you can see the state lands represented here. You can see private lands represented as well. If I wanted to see more terrain, then I might choose this little tool right here that's looks like a grid of 4 boxes, and I might select a different base map. So I can select maybe one that shows more imagery. Go ahead with that. You'll see some of that change behind the map. Also show you that you have some other tools available over here at the top left, including a layers list. And so if I click on the stack of layers, I can, for instance, turn off the wilderness area or turn it back on. I can turn off the surface management so that you don't see which lands are which, but you can see the terrain a little bit better. I can also, if I want to identify areas by township and range, I can toggle that on. So now I can see where I am in terms of township and range, and I can turn the sections on as well. And so that, particularly if you're trying to identify where a route might be missing, that could be really useful information to say it's in 2 South, 14 West, or 11 West, section 21. So just know that those options are available there in the layers list, which again is over here on the top left. Another option, if you have your own data about where routes are located and you want to see those in relation to this map, you can add your data by clicking on the next button over next to this. The legend is an add data layer, and so if you click on that, you can search for data on the web, but you can also upload your own files if you simply click on the file option here along the top of add data, and then you can find that file on your computer and upload it. If you do that, you'll be able to interact with that data in relation to this map. However, the BLM will not get that data. In other words, it does not send the data to the BLM or save it to the e-planning site. That's only for your own use. If you do have data you think would be useful for the BLM, you'll need to submit that via e-planning or via email. Find a way to get that to the BLM otherwise. We could spend a lot of time kind of scrolling around this map, but we wanted to show you some of the basics that you have access to. And with that, I think you've spent enough time listening to me, and I'll turn it back over to Miley as she facilitates some of the questions, and we'll try to answer those as best we can.
Hey, real quick, sorry, could I jump in on this, Cam and Miley? Just to mention that it is possible to attach a file with your comments and e-planning. So if you do have a GPS file that you wanted to submit to the BLM, we would welcome that. And you can do that through the e-planning comment system. Thank you.
That's a great point, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Cam. That was an excellent presentation. And thank you, Nancy, for adding that comment about e-planning. We dropped a couple things in the chat. So that first link will take you to the project site on e-planning. And then the next bit of information, if you didn't want to make your comments through e-planning, you could, like Cam was saying, either use the email address that we dropped in there, or come in person to the Yuma Field Office, or send those comments. There's also an address for the Arizona State Office as well listed. So with that, we have not received any questions in the Q&A, so I will ask Matthew, if you don't mind, to kind of explain how to raise your hand to participate in the Q&A session.
Yeah, so you should be seeing at the bottom of your screen a raise hand button. And if you go ahead and click that, we can give you the ability to unmute yourself and provide comment. We don't have anybody calling in via phone.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, you got it.
So I know that was a lot of information, so we'll just kind of leave this screen up and give you a chance to think about your questions. Again, you can type them in using Q&A, or just raise your hand if you'd like to ask them live.
Also, since we're here, if there's a particular area that you wanted to look at, and we could go ahead and dive into that, if that would help anyone get more familiar with using this system that we have.
Ray, is there anything you wanted to add that we missed in this presentation?
No, Cam hit on everything. We'll have some hard copy maps available at the Yuma Field Office starting tomorrow. So for those folks that want to come into the office and look at those maps and provide some comments in person, that can do that as well. There'll be some comment sheets that you can write down if you do have some comments on any routes that are missing.
Thank you, Ray. Well, we really appreciate you all taking the time to join us tonight and learn, how to make comments about the route inventory. So I just want to remind everyone that if at any time you have any questions, you can reach out to me, to Nancy. Our contact information is on that e-planning project page. We really are seeking your input on this. So especially like Ray mentioned, if there's a route that you use that you don't see on this route inventory, that's really important information, as well as everything that Cam mentioned about, information that you are aware of for the routes that are showing on the route inventory, their use, purpose and need, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we would just want to make sure we have the most complete inventory possible of this travel management area. before we go through this. It's an extensive process to evaluate all of these routes and to propose different designations and share that with the public. We collect your feedback. So very important that we get as complete an inventory as possible, because otherwise it will probably be a long time before we do a repeat effort for this area. I may turn my camera off, but we're going to be here. We welcome the public to, as you digest this information and think more about it. If you have any questions, then let us know in the chat or raise your hand through the Zoom webinar if we have that feature on, and we'll be happy to come back on and interact. Thank you.
So I haven't seen any hands that have been raised, and we don't have any questions in the Q&A box. I'll just throw it out there one last time. Is there anyone who has any questions? And if you do, please raise your hand, or again, just click on that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom panel to enter your question. And we'll hang out for just a little bit longer here. Well, we haven't received any questions, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. We thank you all for joining this evening. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to Nancy Favor or me, Miley Adler. Our contact information is available on the ePlanning project website. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. Take care.